All right, welcome. So this is Jerusha Alaun, the virtual Herald, and today we're having a special episode. Today is Monday, May 27th or 26th, excuse me, and in the United States it is Memorial Day, which is a day to commemorate the those fallen veterans that have fallen in the line of duty or that are no longer with us. In the SCA, this is also kind of like the unofficial opening of the tournament season, at least here in the United States. Several major events are wrapping up today, or in the East Coast. We had several crown tournaments, including in the Mid-Realm, Trimaris, and Meridies. On the western side of the country, we had Grand Outlandish in New Mexico, Potrero War in San Diego, and various other sundry events in the known world. I myself decided to stay home. Now, typically I stay home on Memorial Weekend just because it's a huge travel weekend, and I'm not a big crowd person as much as people would think otherwise. Doubly so in this current political climate. As you guys are, if you haven't been living under a rock, you guys are aware that it is a little bit difficult for people that are melanated to travel freely in the United States. Specifically, if you're within the 100-mile radius of the border, which is technically where ICE, Customs, Immigration, and Enforcement, is supposed to operate within. However, there have been reports of incursions well outside of that. Also, if you're if you're traveling by air, there has also been an upswing in adverse activity or adverse situations. So today I kind of wanted to talk about that since it's, people are on their way back from being out and about in the SCA and coming back. So, and to help me talk about this, I have a special guest that I'm about to introduce. Good friend of mine. I've known him for years. He has been, we first met when I was living in the Mid-Realm, and he was living in the Mid-Realm as well. However, he has since relocated to North Shield. Let me see. His name is Thegn Samson Muskovich, and he's been playing in the SCA since about December 2013. So still a baby, as far as I'm concerned anyway. He's a fighter, artisan, and accomplished cook, and is also the creator of the SCA class Trans 101 for the SCA. He has interests in the cultures of Africa and Russia that thrived along the Silk Road in the mid-900s, and the Gullah Geechee culture that started during the time period of the SCA and thrives even today. I'll have to ask about that because I have no idea what that is. Modernly, Milan Nelson is a Black and Choctaw man of trans experience who has been transitioning since 2012. He has experience working in law enforcement, security, safety, and holds a master's degree with an emphasis on national security for threat response and management. So he is very uniquely qualified to speak about this. And I believe that, and what brought this on is he posted a comment on his Facebook page, lamenting the fact that he's not able to travel to Canada. And I'll go ahead and have him talk more about that. But without further ado, please welcome to the virtual Herald, the Herald Speaks, Thegn Samii. Hi.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which part of the United States you're in.
Right. It is 10 o'clock here in sunny Las Vegas. I ended up having to wake up a little early. My cat, Carrot, she's currently not doing so well. She's in kidney failure, and she woke us up this morning to she woke me up at least early to the sound of her making a mistake on the bed. So, but she's she's comfortable right now. She's in her little area right there, and she's had her morning meds and all of that. So she's doing well.
Good.
And so, but before we continue, let's talk a little bit about what prompted us to decide to have this conversation in the Virtual Herald. So I kind of alluded to it in your introduction. You made a post in your Facebook. We've been Facebook friends for years now. I think you were one of the first people I met in the mid realm, because I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah, we've known each other for a while. I think like we actually met at SCA 50 year.
Yes, and that's right and that was the first year that I moved out. I had just moved out to mid realm from Aitenveld, and that was one of my first major events. But it just feels like it's been forever. So, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about what that post was, and a little bit about how the response is, and we're just going to kind of take the conversation from there.
Yeah. So the post I had made, so by the way, my Facebook is locked down. So unless you are a friend of a friend, like you're not going to find me online.
Oh, and well, of course. I mean, I would expect nothing less from,
right. But just to kind of give context to your viewers.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that is fair to say. Thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't even think about that. Unlike you, my socials are not locked at all.
Mine are mostly locked down because of work stuff, like specifically because of all the things that you'd mentioned about my career path. Like I've worked security, I've worked in law enforcement, currently do work in law enforcement. And then also with my master's degree, I'm, if I'm looking for like additional, if I'm looking for federal jobs in the future, that's a thing. Yeah. So, but the whole reason this conversation is happening is because I had made a post on Facebook lamenting the fact that I can't go to Canada on Labor Day weekend. So there's an event called Gimli that the Barony of Castle Rouge hosts in their part of North Shield. So they're the only barony that North Shield has that is in Canada. So the reason why this was so important to me is that the reason why I have the title Thegn is I'm a former landed baron. So the barony that I presided over is the Barony of Carrigbon in the Mid Realm. They're the sister barony to the Barony of Castle Rouge. Mm-hmm. So since the plague era, we've been trying to get up there, like either myself or other members of the barony to get up there and say, hey, let's reconnect, let's reestablish this connection with you guys. Mm-hmm. And I was really hoping, as a former landed of the sister barony, to go up and celebrate their 50th anniversary with them. So it's also their 50 year. So that's why it's a landmark year for them, is really important. And I'm like, so I was talking with people last year prior to the election of like, hey, let's start making plans for me to come up. And then I'm also going to try and get some of the members of the Barony of Carrigbon to come up as well. And then we can all travel up together, and it'll be, this whole like, hey, we're back together. This is really cool. Mm-hmm. And then the current president won the election. So that changed all my travel plans. And given everything that's been happening the last several months with ICE and all of the detentions of people coming back and forth across the border, I started talking with some other friends in North Shield about going up to this event. And they're like, no, that's a bad idea. Like, that's a bad idea for a number of reasons. And I was just feeling particularly annoyed about the fact that, despite the fact that I have a valid passport that has my correct gender on it, there's still a risk that if I try to cross the border, I could be detained. One, because of the fact that my gender marker has changed from my birth certificate. I have my birth certificate changed and everything. So there is some questionability about documentation to some degree, despite the fact that it's been legally issued, and also the fact that I'm a person of color, and that has overwhelmingly been the target of ICE detentions. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, like, I'm having to weigh my cost-benefit analysis, especially given my career field, and going, how much is this worth to me? And ultimately deciding that it's at this current point with the way things are, it's not worth it for me to travel, even though I was really looking forward to doing this thing in our hobby.
Right, right. And the decision that you had to make echoes the decision and the things that a lot of people have to think about in context with and obviously this is very much a real world issue, but also within the SCA itself. I mean, for example, I believe is it the current crown of, or their highnesses of Eldemir, who just stepped up, they made a post right after they won Crown Tournament, stating emphatically that they will not be going to Penzic this year, and a good chunk of that kingdom has also elected not to come, simply because of the not. It's more in solidarity, but it's also because of the risk. I mean, yes, people of color and those of different genetic or gender minorities, I guess that's a good place to put it, um, are currently a target of this administration.
Yep.
But anybody really who is not a United States citizen has the potential to be detained and held and deported, and not necessarily back to their country of origin.
Yep.
If you've been paying attention to the news, you've heard about this Danish citizen out of Mississippi who went to an immigration meeting to finalize his citizenship, and he was detained ostensibly because he forgot to fill out a single form back in 2015. Now you would say, well, why? And the logic has been, and the comment has been made, well, you should have been taking care of you should have been on top of the forms you've been filling out. And that's true. I mean, obviously, 10 years is a long time to go without filling out a supposedly important form. But at the same time, 10 years, the government didn't seem to care for 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, it really cares a lot. So that's just an example. And that person is a cis-het white male who it looks like his wife, or at least his wife, and him were supporters of the current administration. Something leopards eating faces. So it's a valid concern. And this is something that may not be a big a deal in like middle actually no, it is a big deal no matter where in the known world you are, because it's rapidly becoming apparent, and feel free to disagree with me, Samii, that this current administration is not really is not, they're not really they no longer seem to be concerned with the rule of law, at least in
that is very much a thing, and this is just a continuation, honestly, of the previous administration that this president sat in during as the 45th president.
Yes.
But more so emboldened. It's like, actually, when I was doing a little bit of research to prep for the show, I looked at the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map. And you can actually see, like, over the years of the current administration and like the prior administration of this current president, where the numbers kept increasing, no matter what type of offensive, no matter what type of hate it was, you saw a greater increase over time.
Right.
And it's just because that person's supporters have become emboldened, especially, after we had January 6th.
Exactly.
That's a whole nother conversation entirely. And as someone who is in emergency management and works in law enforcement, like, I have very strong opinions about that, but that's not the focus of this specific conversation. But it also is one of those things that contributes to the current status of the United States.
Right. And to be blunt about it, it's just not safe.
Mhm.
It's not safe for citizens to leave. It's not safe for people to come in.
Yep.
And because it has been made extremely clear with recent actions by various government agencies
Mhm.
that if there is any reason for them to detain you or to make things more difficult that they need to be, they're going to do so.
Yep.
Now it's not all horrible. Like, to provide some background for myself, I do a lot of travel, a lot of airline travel, uh, and and I have not had any issues yet. But I also about a year and a half ago, before all of this went down, I went ahead and signed up and purchased a TSA pre-check. And let me tell you, that's the best $80 I've ever spent in my life.
So, I did. So I actually, like I said, I have a current
Mhm,
passport. I've done some
mhm,
travel in the last year or
mhm,
so, and like, and one of those trips was going out of the country and then returning. No issues
mhm,
whatsoever. TSA is always an interesting beast for me to handle as a person of trans experience, as a trans man,
mhm,
because I bind. So what happens usually is like I'll go through usually it's I'll have to go through the back scanner anyways
right.
because that they have at the airport. But the last couple of times I've traveled, I've gotten selected for additional screening. I'm just kind of like, I know how this process should work, because I've been trained on the X-ray systems. I've been trained on the backscatter systems. I know how they work, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. This is a weird substance. It's not. It's spandex. It's several layers of compressed spandex,
Right,
but
because and because it's so compressed, obviously you're gonna have a bomb in there. But that's just me being funny.
right,
Mhm.
But I've been selected for additional screen. I'm like, okay, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I know what this is. Like, I don't tell them that I've worked security, but I'm just kind of like,
Right, right. Because sometimes you just got to keep some shit close to the vest. You know what I'm
right,
saying?
exactly.
Mhm.
But I'm like, I know how,
Literally.
right. But like,
Oh God, I'm horrible.
but like in my time as working security, I have done pat downs of people,
Mhm,
and like I know how to do it where it's not going to cause dysphoria for people,
mhm.
but it's still one of those like it's still this additional thing of like I have a valid passport. I'm not on any watch list. For me to work law enforcement, I can't be. Just
Yeah,
saying.
I was gonna say because that's one of those conditions of employment type deal, right?
Yeah, yeah, there,
Yeah.
yeah, there. I mean, there's those things.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things where I'm just like, it's more of an annoyance at this point. But for other people, it can sour their trip, and
Right.
it can cause mental health issues for them.
Right.
Um,
I have heard. I myself, because I have a very large online social presence because, ta-da, I'm the virtual herald. And I tend to, the other reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I have seen an uptick in postings from my fellow Scadians. And obviously, I'm not naming names or anything like that
right.
about them having, interesting, air quote there,
Mhm.
experiences, not just with TSA, but with the border. And my experience is, having lived most of my life on the western and southwestern part of the country. I grew up in the Metro Phoenix area, which is within the 100-mile radius of the border.
Yep.
And I grew up under the reign of the notorious Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Do you remember?
Oof.
Are you? Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm already used to carrying around my passport because I had to do that the last 10 years of me living out there because I would literally get stopped for driving while brown. Uh,
Yeah, got opinions on that.
and literally the question was never, what the first thing out of the deputy's mouth is not, oh, do you know why I stopped you, or hey, you were going 55 in a 35. It's, uh, do you have your license and or documentation? I would hand them my passport. They would look at it. You could see. the deputy kind of going, "Oh man," like in their eyes.
Uh-huh.
I wish I was kidding. And then
Oh,
they
I know
would,
you're not. I know
yeah,
you're not.
they would hand me back my passport, and they wouldn't even bother trying to come up with some bullshit excuse. They would just say, "Okay, you're fine. Have a good night." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right." And then I would go on my way, and I have even been stopped for driving while brown while I was in garb, going to and from SDA events.
Wow.
Phoenix metro area is a large area. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but for those of you who are, it's a very large area, very spread out. You know how in the East Coast a lot of large cities have built up, and they have they're still relatively confined in area, but they have a lot of people because they've built up. Well, in Arizona and Phoenix, it's spread out like an amoeba. It's like,
Mhm.
and depending on and there was parts of the city where if I was driving around after a certain hour, my chances of getting stopped would rise exponentially. Now, it wouldn't go. It didn't ever get to the point of it being like a sundown town situation, which is more definitely more prevalent in more rural parts of the country.
Mhm.
Um, but I knew what's up, and so did everyone of my color extraction, and
Mhm.
you just that was just part of the experience. I renewed my passport as soon as I could. um, and I have my real ID, which is another issue that a lot of people are running into. Although
Mhm.
for that one, I have to say, like, real ID has been coming for what, 5, 10 years now.
Like
What is
almost 10 years, yeah.
almost 10 years now? If and they finally decided, okay, it went mandatory on May 7th, I believe,
Yeah.
for the nation. And I gotta say, if you waited until like May 6th to get your real ID, mm,
Sorry, not sorry. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like, dude, you had 10 years to do it. And I also, like, I changed my married. I have my married name is not my maiden name,
Yep.
which, you know, quite frankly, is a good thing. My maiden name is Garcia, and my married name is Stomel, which is a nice non Hispanic name. But but the thing of it, but all of that to say, and I'm just going to bring this back to what we were talking about, is that these real world considerations are something that is that has to be considered, especially as we move forward in this administration and larger events, and the economy also kind of starts
Mhm.
considering things. Um, Potrero, which is our large California-based event in Caid, is located at Potrero Park in the San Diego area, which is within 20 miles of the border and within 2 miles of an ICE checkpoint. Like, you have to drive through an ICE checkpoint on the interstate in order to get to a site. Um,
Yeah.
and that's that itself is the main reason why I chose not to go, and I haven't actually gone in years. I just haven't felt like I really want to test that particular water. But and that's just and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems more menacing and more acute in the western part of the country than it is in the northern part of the country.
So
What are your thoughts on that?
So it isn't and isn't. One of the things I actually want to point out, like with the 100 miles from the border, that also includes the northern border,
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah, it includes the coastlines, it includes all of
Yeah.
those. So while the focus of this administration tends to be the south and southwestern border, that's also a thing too. So like, I live in North Shield, and also I've lived in the Mid Realm.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kingdoms that are basically border states. So
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, UP and Lower Peninsula,
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota, like all of these things,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin that I live in.
Wisconsin.
Right. So
Sorry.
no, you're good. The majority of those states are covered by technically ice jurisdiction. We have ports up here. Like there is a port of Milwaukee, for example. And while we haven't seen we haven't seen any ice. I haven't seen any ice checkpoints, but there's definitely been activity up here.
Oh yes, I've heard about it in the news and whatnot. And but nothing as quite frankly, nothing as sinister as it has been on the South and Southwest. Like I genuinely am not, even though I have all of my paperwork, I have my passport, I have my real ID, I have a TSA pre-check. That may not mean that all of that. And like I'm already hearing things about people with real ID being stopped and arrested, and their identification being questioned. So it's true. It's not. And which is why whenever I hear someone in the SCA, bless their hearts, talk about, well, I don't want politics intruding on my game. It's like, fucker, I can't. There's nothing I can do. Like, I can't take my skin off at the door, and I can't even get to the door, currently, based on what's going on,
Well, and it's not just currently either. So, like, one of the things I've kind of tossed around the concept of doing is like going to Gulf Wars. There are people
that's another one. That's another very problematic event, because where is it located? MISSISSIPPI, which is not exactly known as a bastion of freedom and inclusiveness.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, it's a historically Mississippi is not kind to those who are not straight white Christians. And quite frankly, it has changed a little bit, but still there's still this prevalence of like sundown towns, like we were talking about earlier.
Right. I find it hilarious whenever I hear someone say, "Oh, I'm like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Like, that shit's still around. What the fuck are you talking about?"
Well, tell you, I was recently talking to somebody about like even traveling to Indiana. So northern Indiana up to about Indianapolis really is okay-ish. Like if you stay on 65, I-65. But you get south of Indianapolis, you have towns like, Whitestown, Brownsburg. Those are historically sundown towns.
Right.
I drive down to St. Louis quite frequently. I pass through a town called Litchfield. I am not comfortable. Like, it looks pretty, like, off the highway, which is I-55, major interstate. I don't feel safe stopping off at that exit.
Right. And because and this is culturally embedded information. Like, it's almost like if you know, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, I know that there have been books in the past published, guides to sundown towns. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, how quaint. It's just, that's historical." I'm like, "No, that shit's real right now." Right? I'm pretty sure somewhere out there's a Google spreadsheet that's being kept somewhere.
There's actually an online map. The website is called Green Book Global.
Book Global?
Yep, Green Book Global. And it isn't, and I had to, and because there was a study done about 2 or 3 years ago about sundown towns and asking people to update information. That's one of the websites. The other one is the Modern Green Book. Modern Green Book is currently being renovated. So Green Book Global, though, is the one that's actually active, and like it has historical and current sundown towns, or possibility of sundown towns.
Right. So it is for those of you who are. I'm going to go ahead and put the URL on the banner here. Give me just 1 second while I do that.
But yeah, so I mean, and there are definitely references for for people who want to look up and see, like, okay, like, where is this event actually located? Where is this event located? Where do I have to travel through to get there? And that usually tends to be like where a lot of my concern comes in, is in going, okay, where where am I going? Where are we hosting at? Because depending on where that location is, I may or may not be going to that event.
Yeah, and it's not just where the event itself is held. A lot of people are like, "Well, the event is being held in an open place. It's, you know, the site's great, the people are lovely." Yeah, but getting there and getting home.
There. Yep.
It's the route that you have to take, and that's also something that people have to consider for Penzic. The ones that drive across the country, or not even across the country, just from Ohio to friggin' PA. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people, you know, of color have to consider, you know, okay, how am I going to get there with the least amount of risk to myself? And it's something that, you know, that has to be considered. Now, again, this all also ties into the whole thing of, you know, sites are increasingly more difficult to get. You know, it's more and more expensive to rent sites. You know, there's a lot more limits. The problem is more acute west of the Mississippi. You know, one of the really awesome things that I really enjoyed about living in the Midwest is that, you know, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting like a county fairground or a Boy Scout camp or something like that. The further west you go, the more difficult it is to find those communal third spaces where you can hold these types of events in conditions that are relatively financially reasonable. I live modernly in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is a tourist town. Getting a site to even like host meetings is difficult because, you know, there you know, space is at a premium, and there's no such thing as a nonprofit discount. They don't need to do it. Like, you know, we're not, you know, they're not catering to us, the local crowd here in Las Vegas. And so that's also, it's a conundrum to be certain. And what can we as Scadians and the SCA as an organization, what can we do to help mitigate or make these things less of an issue for purposes of inclusion? That's the $1 million question.
Yep. And it really is. And one of the things that I really struggle with, and like I was thinking about this actually before we started, before I joined before I joined the show, is that like one of the things I've noticed is that we don't do a lot of demos in urban areas. You know, areas that are traditionally urban, areas that are urban are traditionally inhabited by typically like lower to middle income people, typically people of color. But then there also then raises the issue of, okay, like we're going in these spaces, they're seeing predominantly people who lack melanin and people who don't look like them.
Right.
And so there's that issue too, where it's like, okay, you're going in the spaces, like you don't look like the people of these areas, but then you're also not opening yourself up to making connections.
Right.
And so it's all of these things where it's like, and it all goes back to how the United States has been formed and how we've run, where there's embedded systemic racism. You know, just calling a spade a spade. Right. That's what it is. Like all of the redlining, all of the, well, I'm not quite sure about that person, and you know, internalized biases that really, like, to embody the concept of the dream And I know that I think you've had I think you've had Jessica Van Hattem on here before talking about
No, actually, I have not actually ever have that would definitely be a dream guest. I
right.
know that Zara is a authority
Yep.
on inclusion.
Yep. And
In fact, oh, go ahead.
specifically the appreciation versus appropriation.
Yes.
And that kind of also ties into like why are we not going into spaces that are urban centers? Like why are we not like say like going downtown like X, Y, or Z place and doing a demo where we can, why are we not going where the people are, so to speak? Why
Right.
are we not in the community colleges? Why are we not, going to, Comic-Con? Why are we not going to your local geek conventions?
Right.
Because all of these people from any diaspora are there.
Right. I know that there have been some strides in that, but it's still we still have a long way to go.
Yep.
Specifically out here in the West Coast, we do have a presence at San Diego Comic-Con.
Nice.
The Kingdom of Kai does have a presence there. In some of the other local conventions. In Atenveld, I was actually a staff member for what was then Phoenix Comic-Con and now is Phoenix
Okay.
Fan Fusion.
Nice.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because San Diego Comic-Con apparently sued Utah Comic-Con because they were copywriting the term Comic-Con.
Gotcha.
Which is why why you only have San Diego Comic-Con and everything else calls themselves something else because San Diego got their panties in a twist. So that's a whole other banana.
That's a whole other.
That's a whole other. Like, if you want drama, go to fandom of any kind. Oh my God! Like we are a bunch of social misfits in a social situation. You don't say.
I have strong opinions because I'm also involved in furry. And I've got some opinions about how we handle things in the SCA, but that could be a whole nother. That is a whole nother.
Yes, that is another conversation that I would definitely think that is definitely something that we will want to have a discussion about, in a future episode. But going back to moving to the moving around in the known world, which is the topic of this episode. For those members who are already in the SCA, for those of us in the SCA who are already here, that are of color, that are gender minorities, there has been a lot of, awareness. A lot. I would say that the Rona has kind of thrust that into the consciousness of the SCA. I mean, we can a lot of what we've got going on, here can be traced back to those halcyon days of when everybody was forced to go online and people no longer could hide behind a veneer of civility because the internet knows all, the internet sees all. The internet is all.
No, absolutely. And actually, like even before the pandemic, before COVID happened, like even so, there was still this movement like back in 2015, 2016. Like, I very distinctly remember the Crown of the Mid-Realm saying, "Y'all are welcome, FAFO to those who say otherwise." And I actually ended up telling that Crown later that the reason why I stayed in the SCA is because of that message.
Right. I moved to the Mid-Realm in February of 2016 from the Kingdom of Atenveld. And I've made no bones about the fact that my time in Atenveld was interesting. Towards the end of my time out there, it was at the point where I couldn't do or say anything without having my motives and honor being questioned. And I can say definitively that if I had not moved from Arizona to Ohio, and as funny as that sounds, if I had not moved from Arizona to Ohio, I would have quit the SCA because it was just becoming untenable to participate in the SCA in Atenveld, because I was not, I had gotten on the wrong side of some people, and add to that the fact that I'm a brown woman of color. it was becoming very, very much almost impossible for me to participate in the way I wanted to.
Yep.
But you know what? I'm glad that I stuck it out, because back in 2010, I purchased a Android One, one of the first.
Oh.
I was an early adopter, Samii. I was walking around with my little flippy, and I purchased that in April of 2010, and I attended an Atenville coronation in May of 2010, and I used that phone to do my first live blog
That's awesome.
of coronation. So I some people are like, you should be humble. I am not humble when it comes to this. I brought social media into the SCA. I was the first one to do it. I was the first person to do live blogging. I was the first person to cover crown tournaments. I was the first person to do trading cards. And it all came full circle at East Kingdom Crown Tournament. Because not only did they have the whole, like, the field guide and the trading cards that I designed and put out there, they had the live broadcast.
Right.
It was straight up ESPN, bro.
It was. I watched it. It was.
I was there. I mean, they had the broadcasting booth. They had the mics. They had, quiet please. Yep. Obviously, but once they got into the hall, I mean, there was just no way. They had the equipment. They had the dude sitting there on the laptop playing technical director, which is what I did in college.
Yep.
And it just was like, oh my God, I literally got a tear in my eye, because that was the culmination of what started in May 2010 at Happy Jack Lodge in Happy Jack, Arizona, with me opening up my Android One and posting on my Facebook page who got what award.
I especially love that. Well, one, I love that. So, like, my thing too is, like, I have all of these, all this special credit. Like, my dream job is to be a public information officer. So basically, the face of, hey, there's a national emergency or there's a local emergency. I am the person. I am the talking head.
Yes,
that is the dream job for me.
Yeah, you're the guy that they ask for, that they put out for comments.
Right. So I love that, but also too, like, so part of this too, like, and I debated whether I was going to bring this up or not, but I'm going to bring it up because it's relevant. So one of the things that we get told, because you and I are both on a peerage track for whatever reason, like,
right? So
service or marshal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things that we are constantly told is you need to travel, you need to get out there.
Mm-hmm.
And while the pandemic has been great about bringing everything online and saying, hey, let's also look at the online, there's still a lot of that pressure to travel.
Oh, yes. And even if you do travel, it's not necessarily travel, it's the right travel. And I say this as a person living in Kaid, who is in the most eastern Las Vegas. Berenice Starkoffen is the most easternmost group in Kaid.
Yep.
Kaid comprises of Southern California and Clark County, Nevada. The border is Fresno, and everything south is Kaid. Everything north of Fresno is Kingdom of the West. Nevada is has a similar division. Clark County up to Nye,
okay,
that's Kaid. Everything north of that, which includes a whole hell of a lot of nothing, right, is Kingdom of the West. Because Nevada is a very interesting state, because we've got Reno, Lake Tahoe, Sparks, Carson City up north.
Yep.
7 hours of nothing, including nothing that cannot be recorded or flown over because it is Area 51.
Yep.
And then you've got Vegas.
Yep.
And our group here, Starkoffen, we technically are about 3 hours away from the closest Kaidan SCA group. Huh. And
Yeah.
And we're about an hour away from the closest Atenveld group and about an hour and a half away from the closest group in Artemisia. So, and I'll tell you what, we have a fair bit of, I think we have about 5 or 6 nights that have been made out here. We have about 5 pelicans.
Yep.
3 of them that have been made in the last 5 years.
Wow.
And we have about 2 or 3 laurels, but none of them are from the barony. They've all moved out here from other places. We have 0 homegrown laurels.
Yep.
And no mods. And nobody from our area got tapped to be a premier of the mark. So, you know, and the admonishment has always been, you have to travel. Well, how the hell do you expect someone from Las Vegas to constantly to make that commitment to go to Southern California every weekend, 3 weeks out of the month?
Yep.
I mean, even before the pandemic and before the recession, where you know, it was a time suck, for lack of a better term. Now, with gas prices being what they are, and you know, and the economy being what it is, also the population, Las Vegas, for it being, you know, a large town, you know, it's a pretty large metropolitan area. Also, very much we're large in the sense that we have a lot of people coming in and out, but the local population mostly consists of, you know, people of color and people who work in the service industry.
Yep.
Who are whether that's hospitality. A vast majority of the people in our barony work in hospitality. Our teachers, our first responders. And that type of work does not lend itself to weekend travel. It just doesn't.
No.
It's shift work, you know, especially in a town that is a tourist attraction where the weekend is our busiest time of the week, is our busiest time. Like, you know, most people work on Saturdays. You know, it's not, and even those that don't, like, for example, myself or other folks in the bar, it's like we have to make a decision of how we're going to spend that time. And it's just not feasible or practical to make it a point to travel, because the center of Caid is what we call downtown. And that would be the OC, LA, Lancaster area. I mean, you're from the area. You know what I'm talking about. That Inland Empire area. That's considered Center Caid.
That tracks.
And most of the people that live out there, they're wonderful people. Don't get me wrong.
But they don't want to do the travel outside of their
area. They don't want to travel.
Yep.
And even if they could, and you know, they're also, you know, they're just as insular as, say, any as any, which is, you know, which is not, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but because of that, it's really difficult for people outside of that central part of the kingdom to receive any sort of recognition.
Yep. And I was gonna say, like, North Shield has a similar problem. So 3 of the 5 baronies of North Shield are in Wisconsin. I literally the town that I live in is literally, like, I drive an hour each way and I hit one of 2 baronies. So the 2 baronies that I live between, they constantly are like, well, who do you belong to? I'm like, technically I consider myself crown lands. I'm not really. Like, technically I belong to the barony of Canterworth Mart because of how the zip codes were done. However, I do enough travel that I play with damn near everyone.
And that's kind of where I'm at too. I will say this, and I've said this, and I'm not, and it's like, I am extremely privileged to be able to do what I do. I do not have children. I have a relatively well-paying job in an industry that is not beholden to the weekend. I have a husband who's very supportive of what I do. And I happen to live in a town with a really good fucking airport.
Yeah.
So, and my philosophy is that there is no such thing as a day trip event for me.
Yeah, for you, there's not. Absolutely. I've driven that route from Vegas to Barstow to LA. There is
that especially from Vegas to Barstow.
No, God, that's such
there's a whole hell of a lot of nothing. I mean, there's Baker, but really.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, Baker is like, not even people don't even live in Baker. They work in Baker and they live in a trailer park up the road.
Yep, literally. Yeah.
Baker is not any sort of it's a brutal drive.
Yeah. It really is.
And the closest group to us, if we were to attend an event in their area, it's a 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
And maybe when I was younger, sure, I could wake up at 4 a.m, drive down to the event, play hard all day, and then drive right back up. But I'm too old for that shit, man.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Where like I'm kind of going, like I was looking at my my schedule for June and going, well, okay, I'm definitely doing Kingdom A&S because I have ambitions. It is what it is. But then, like, I'm doing an event the next weekend that's 45 minutes away from me, and I'm camping at my friend's backyard. Okay, which doesn't suck. And then the third weekend, I was planning on going out to Minnesota for a mock rapier crown that we're doing. I would love to go out there and support them, but I'm just kind of going, that's 3 weekends in a row where I'm traveling. How about I not? But what I was really trying to get at, though, with the whole thing about travel, and you very much hit the nail on the head with the majority of our people are service industry. They're, if they're lucky, they have a job where they don't have to work weekends. But a lot of times people are having to take time off to, take vacation time, do all these things. Like, I mean,
I have to, if I want to travel to downtown Caid, which I will be doing in a couple of weeks for our Kingdom Collegium, because I'm teaching.
Nice.
Again, ambitions. Right. I have to take that Friday off, and then I have to pay for a motel because that's another aspect of old school SCA that has gone along the wayside. The tradition of crash base and whatnot is really not as prevalent now as it was even 5-10 years ago. People are just not as comfortable opening up their space to others, which is totally fair. I don't begrudge that to anyone. My house is available to anyone, whoever wants to come out and visit Star Coffin. But at the same time, it's just not it's not, especially out here in the West. It's a lot more easier in the eastern. I have found in the eastern part of the country to find crash base or places to camp and stuff like that are, but the further west you go, the less that is part of the culture. It's just not as. It's definitely not seen as. But anyway, going back to my point, I have to pay for a motel. I have to take a day off work.
Gas money.
Gas money, yes. Again, my privilege is showing. I do have an electric vehicle, and now that they have chargers up in Baker, finally, I can actually make it to LA. For a while there, unless you had a Tesla, you really couldn't make that drive because there is literally nothing. Yeah,
no, I'm familiar with Baker, so super familiar.
They finally got chargers there, man. That are not Tesla.
Wow.
But if I didn't have the EV, I would have to use what we lovingly call the hoopty, which is a 2011 Toyota Scion that has been across the country 3 times.
Right.
But yeah, there's gas money.
Yep.
And then not to mention the cost of attending the event,
Yep.
The cost of, like, I'm teaching 4 classes at
Yep.
this year's event,
Wow.
getting the materials and stuff like that. And I'm okay to do that. I'm not complaining at all.
Right.
But that's a huge ask
Mm-hmm.
for others that may not have the circumstances that I do.
Yep. And I'm in a very similar spot where I'm privileged to make enough money that, like, I'm teaching, like, we have a large event called Warriors and Warlords coming up in a couple months, month and a half. And I'm typically a vendor there because I make pretty shiny things. But I'm also offering up my shop space literally to teach. Like, I'm going to have a table and a half of, here's my shit. The rest of my space is, hey, come in and learn how to do stuff. Again, part of it's ambitions. But also part of it is giving back to my kingdom and doing the thing that we try to do in the SCA, which is
share our knowledge.
Share knowledge and teach the old skills, even with modern tools. So that's what I'm trying to do a lot more of, just because that's kind of my way of paying it forward, just overall.
Right. I've always been fond of saying that the SCA taught me how to be an adult. I found the SCA as a snot nose. I mean, I knew about the SCA when I was growing up in Phoenix because of the Freaks on the Park. The SCA would have the Barony of Aytonville would host their fighter practices Wednesday nights at Encano Park, which is this park right in the middle of town. And and I grew up in the hood, and we all knew about the Freaks in the Park on Wednesdays. They would come out, and obviously I couldn't participate until I was over 18 because even back then they kind of paid attention to that sort of thing, which is good.
It is good.
But if it wasn't for the people that I had met and who helped subsidize my game, I would not have been able to participate, which is why I myself always look to pay that forward. Whether that's offering crash space, whether that's teaching my classes with for a nominal fee. Like, I charge $2 for the handout if you want to keep it. I have kits that I make, and if you want to keep it, it's $5, which that's nowhere near what it cost me to put the thing together. And that's okay. Like, usually I take that money and I go and buy more stuff because and I think that attitude of inclusion and making space for others, that is what I think the solution lies.
So for me, it very much the same thing to some degree. Like, there's some stuff where, like, there's definitely that part of, like, my SCA experience where it's I'm just going to shove my money forward and just, like, pay for the things I need to take care of. But it kind of goes back to that concept of, like, what is community? And that's something that I learned growing up outside of the SCA. So I found the SCA unofficially, like, as kind of a, like, hey, this would be kind of a cool thing to get into, like, when I was, like, 13 or 14. I didn't actually join until I was in my, till I was in my 20s.
Right. Yeah. Same thing. I was aware of the SCA as a young teenager. But I didn't actually start participating until I turned 18 and I was in college. So all of that to say, we're sharing our experiences here. All to say is this: we were very fortunate to have found the SCA and to have had people in our lives that have helped us in our journey to become, the participants that we are today. And but we are the exception, not the rule. And I think that is something that we really need to kind of have open conversations about, making ourselves more available and opening ourselves to help those that are not economically as fortunate. Because at the end of the day, Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, you're Black. Yes, we are other, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But what separates us from other folks in our similar is green money.
Mm-hmm.
That is the rub. And I have said this for years. The SCA is not a cheap hobby. And that more than anything else is what is the biggest barrier of entry
Mm-hmm.
for people of color. Because
Mm-hmm.
people of color, as a general rule, don't have that type of income that
Mm-hmm.
makes it so that the SCA is a viable form of entertainment.
Yep.
So it's squaring that, it's circling that square
Yeah.
that the leadership of the various kingdoms and the corporate organization should be thinking about. And they've done some things towards that, like they have the Signorati fund, where you can apply at the corporate level, where you can apply to pay for your SCA membership. And I understand that the SCA membership fees and the NMS, you know, that's the cost of being part of an organization.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The cost is not the issue. It's what are we getting for that cost?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, the cost is worth the ROI is worth it. But how are we going to? Yeah, for a lot of people, for some people, it's not.
Yep.
And 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 it, and how are we going to market ourselves to the outside world, to
Mm-hmm.
people who already have other options,
Mm-hmm.
other fandoms, other outlets for their creativity.
Right.
I think for a long time, the SCA suffered from the fact that they thought that they were the only game in town. Well, maybe that was true 15, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That is no longer the case. The SCA is not the only game in town. It's not the only thing that people can do to exercise their creativity.
Yep.
And that I believe is where the issue lies. And what can we as individuals, we as a local group, we as a regional group, we as a corporate entity, what are we going to do to ensure that we are not only being inclusive to the people who are already here,
Mm-hmm.
but seeing ourselves as a viable option for that person looking for something to do with their time and money.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, but like it's having people like yourself, myself, like Zara, like Gigi, who are very open and outspoken and going, "Hi, I'm here," like Seto, even like where we have those faces, but also like balancing that with not making us tokens,
Right.
and that's kind of where that hard, it's that, where's that line at?
Yeah.
Because for a long time, like I have participated in demos, I have ran demos because I wanted people to see this is what you can do. Especially when I was landed, I specifically, in my local community, I specifically remember a young Black boy coming up with his dad and going, "Hey, look, there's the king. I'm not a king. I'm a landed baron."
But you don't know
Crown
that.
made me look like I was royalty.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you know what? If that kid takes that and takes the idea of like, I can be a king or a prince or some sort of noble,
Someone of rank.
someone of rank, that is important. That is sort of like it, that's that sort of positive image that I want to continue to present.
Right.
That is, that's one of the reasons why I continue, even though it burns me out a lot to do it. It's a lot of emotional labor to do the Trans 101 class, especially in this day and age.
Yeah. When let's talk about that really briefly as we kind of start wrapping up this conversation. So you one of the major things that you're known for is the Trans 101 in the SCA. That class you start when did you start teaching that class?
I started teaching that class in, I think, March of 2017.
Oh
Is when
wow,
I
yeah.
did it.
Yeah, it wasn't
So,
very long after I moved out to the mid realm that I
yeah.
first heard about the class.
So I did the class the first time at a local event, and then the following year I went to Penzic and that same year I went to Penzic and did 2 sessions of it. And since then I've continued to update the material in it, like intermittently, as time allows and everything. And it's become a thing. And there's actually several other people that have done classes in the same vein, but I was the first.
Right. And and as someone who was also the first, I honor and respect that, because I think it's very important for people to understand that the cool stuff that people are doing now didn't just poof appear. Someone had to blaze that trail. Someone had to, take their lumps. Like I was talking to the EK Broadcasting Network at their Crown tournament, and I'm like, wow. I'm just so tickled that you guys are able to do this, because the mere act of me doing the updates that I was doing caused such a issue when I first started doing it in Atenveld. I was threatened with banishment, dude.
What?
For doing live blogging. Yeah. It was not well received. It was poo-pooed, and I was run out of the social media team, or I was run out of the that's the social media team. I helped create the social media team in there, but I was run out because I wasn't the reason they gave me was I wasn't what they wanted to see in their brand. And then that's because for a while, I first started doing Virtual Herald on my Facebook page, my own personal Facebook page.
Yep.
And when the Kingdom of Atenveld Facebook page was created back in like 2011, right around that 2011, I was one of the first admins of that page.
Okay.
And I was posting as the Kingdom of Atenveld, and then that's when the society finally said, "Oh, hey, social media is a thing now. I guess we should have such a." So they created this office, the social media officer, and the person that the kingdom selected did not like me. Thought that I was not, whatever, and they ran me out. And then that's when I decided to create the Virtual Herald page back in 2012, and that's where I've been ever since. And I see, and obviously I'm not naming names. I'm not doing, I'm not going to put people out on blast. Although I will mention that, that person has no longer really plays anymore. And that Duke and Duchess are now like total selfie hogs, but whatever.
People adapt, and
I know people adapt and change and stuff like that, but somebody had to do that.
Yeah.
Like somebody had to be the one to put themselves in the way.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people say, don't saying what you're saying is, putting yourself is being prideful or demonstrating, being too much. I'm sorry. I don't. I'm going to you damn Skippy. I'm going to own that. I'm the one that started this shit. If you and I've got the receipts to prove it.
Mm,
So yeah.
yeah.
When was the have you and now that and now that you have other people taking this class and all or teaching this class and whatnot, when was the last time you taught it?
So the last time I taught it was December, actually, in North Shield.
Mm.
So I did that, and I also did my class on the Gullah Geechee and community resilience.
Yes, I was going to ask about that because I was reading your intro and I'm like, what the Gullah Geechee? What?
so so let me wrap up the thing about the Trans 101. So the last time I taught my specific class was in December. And it was because I was starting to kind of see the writing on the wall with the current administration where they were going after the trans community, the trans and gender nonconforming community a lot. And I'm like, well, shit, this is going to be a thing. So let's do this mostly because I wanted people to understand that we've always been here. Hence the shirt, trans people will always exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to understand that they aren't alone. And that is really kind of the that's kind of my that's the hill I'll die on. That's a hill I will die on.
Yeah.
No, but so the Gullah Geechee.
Yeah.
So the Gullah Geechee is a current community that technically started during the time period of the SCA here in the U.S. So the Gullah Geechee are the current Gullah Geechee are descendants of enslaved peoples who basically founded their own community so that they could survive. And they're based out of Charleston. Like that's where their international headquarters is, for lack of a better. That's like where their hub is.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things of and these are peoples that were brought over to the United States as enslaved populations who didn't have a common language, and they developed their own language called Gullah. Mm-hmm. So it's very similar to AAVE, so Ebonics. Mm-hmm. It's very similar, but it's very different. It's very sing-songy. Mm-hmm. But essentially, like, they formed a community to survive, and their culture has existed since then. So like late 1400s, late 1400s, 1500s to now, these people have existed. And there's something that like I as a person of color, I basically am taking this as my right and privilege to do this. I'm gonna make some racists uncomfortable.
I'm all for that. Being here pisses off all the right people.
Exactly. And having a community that is still thriving today, that started during the time period of the SCA, where it's like, oh no, and it's people of color, specifically Black folks, that are thriving. They're trying to thrive. Like their culture is being threatened by all the same things that all the rest of us are. So gentrification, redlining, all of those things, their foodways are still being threatened, but yet they still survive and they still thrive.
Exist. We are still. I'm reminded with Duck. We are still here.
Yep.
No matter what you and I use
the general.
The generative. No matter what you do to try and eradicate us and erase us, we are still here.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that that's a good way to end this conversation with. At the end of the day, we are still here. I'm still here. You're still here.
Yep.
And we're not going to go anywhere. And I think that if anyone who listens to this should take away, obviously think about themselves and what they can do as an individual to help foster this inclusivity. But also as leaders in the SCA, think about how moving around the known world is just as important as getting to the event and participating in the event. Getting there is also the challenge. And I think that is something that sometimes is just not thought of, and not maliciously. I don't think it's not, it's just something that, it's not something that people consider, because some people, for them, it's not a problem.
So one thing I will say though, before I know that we're trying to wrap up,
right?
Because I know that one of the things that I have been asked on that, specifically on that post, is what can I do to help? Safety in numbers, like it's always going to be a safety in numbers, like identifying also where your event is being held as well as the area surrounding it.
Right, being cognizant of where you're planting that flag. Making inviting those people of color to come with you, using your privilege to help. I know that specifically in Potrero, I know that there were some of the people in our barony are going down there in groups just to get through the checkpoint, because it's a lot, because it's a lot easier for ICE to just say, okay, this is just a group of people, and then just let them through. Whereas someone by themselves of the melanated variety, it gives them more of an impetuous to start some shit, for lack of a better. Other things that we can do is, be aware of, of the population that would be interested in our event, and and trying to make things easier economically for them, offering crash space, making that effort to welcome people into your homes. And I know that that's tough, especially nowadays with everyone kind of, the parent, it's not paranoia if they're really coming after me type deal. But I would have to think, I counter that with, one of the best things about the SCA is the fact that it is such a built-in community. Like, I've moved across the country and back, and I've always known that I have a community to arrive to, no matter where I land. And I think that that is something that needs to be fostered and needs to be highlighted more, especially for events that are, that are larger and multi-kingdom, being that beacon, and then was there anything else in that thread that you found useful that you might want to share?
Pretty much is like really just like fostering that community and working within your network and establishing your network. So like introducing newer people, and like those newer people, like teaching them like, hey, this is how we do things here. I had people do that with me when I moved to North Shield, because North Shield is very different than the Mid-Realm. North Shield is very much the Mid-Realm's unrepentant, I'm going to go screw off and do whatever cousin, and does not, it's a very different beast. So there was definitely
a learning curve.
It was definitely a learning curve, like coming down here. But also, since I have that Mid-Realm experience, like if I have friends that are going down to the Mid-Realm, they're like, what are the things that I need to know? I'm like, well, where are your regalia for one? Because it's one of the original three kingdoms, and they stand on tradition.
Yeah, they're very trad.
Very much so.
Very much so. Anyway, I think I know that you've got to get ready to go to work, and I probably should, like, I don't know, do something. I don't know. It's my day off, so what am I going to do? I don't know. Probably edit this and get it ready to go on the air. Thank you so much, Samii, for the conversation. I know that we kind of meandered in different ways, but I think we expressed very cognizantly the main point of this conversation, talking about our experiences as people of color, traveling within the known world, and I hope that people who listen to this kind of take away from that, and start thinking and considering, what they can do to make that movement just a little bit easier for those of us that have concerns. So this has been Jerusha Alaon, the virtual Herald. The Herald speaks. I will come at you next time with another topic of conversation and another and something else to discuss. Until then, be safe, be good to each other. Don't do anything stupid, and if you do, don't get caught. Have a great one.